Hello, good morning, and welcome to another update from the National Television Network. Today, the 19th of January 2021. In studio, we have the Ministry of Education with us, officials from the Ministry of Education, as well as the Chief Environmental Health Officer in studio with us to give us an update, very important, following the reopening of the school term. I now want to make mention of the individuals on panel. We have Mr. Parker Ragnanan, the Chief Environmental Health Officer. We have also in studio Dr. Fiona Philip-Meyer, the Chief Education Officer, and Ms. Michelle Charles, the Permanent Secretary in the Department of Education, Innovation, and Gender Relations. I open the floor now to you, Ms. Charles, to make the opening statements.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Jesse, and good morning to our viewers. The Department of Education, Innovation, and Gender Relations welcomes the opportunity to provide further clarity on matters which have been causing anxiety and concern to our parents, teachers, students, and our citizens at large. We have had the opportunity to observe what has unfolded during this first week of school and are in a position to report and comment on our findings. Let me start by saying that the Department of Education is a responsible entity working in the best interest of our nation, not just one group, but in fact, endeavoring to balance the needs of all of our stakeholders. You will appreciate then that the challenges we face as we seek to develop policies, guidelines, and protocols that address the needs of our diverse stakeholder groups. We do not posture as having all of the answers, and we may not always get right as per the yardstick of any one particular group. However, we are thankful for the feedback and recommendations that we receive from all of our engagements. The contributions are reflected in all of the documents that have been crafted by the department. Let me state that within the education landscape, there are three key groups of players: the administration of the Department of Education, the school leaders, teachers, and ancillary staff, and parents and students. We all have a critical role to play in ensuring a successful outcome. It's about the administrative team playing its part, principals and teachers playing their roles, parents and teachers and students playing their roles as well, each holding the other accountable for their responsibilities within this equation. And so, Jesse, that is why we're here today, to address and allay the fears of our citizens. With me on this presentation is, as you have already introduced, our Chief Education Officer and Mr. Raghunanan. Our Minister of Education may be joining us in a bit. So I'll hand over to the Chief at this point.
Okay, before we do that, I just want to indicate to our viewership this morning that we do have members of the media present with us, and also for members of the media who are watching online and on air as well. We do invite any questions that you may have for the duration of this morning's program. Dr. Meyer?
Yes. Thank you so very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the general populace. At education, we pride ourselves on a consultative process and posture, and we are very satisfied with the level of engagement we've had so far, noting that all of our protocols, our guidelines, our education continuity plan have been informed by those engagements. And so as we continue to navigate those uncertain times, as we continue to navigate the balance between our various stakeholder groups and what their perspectives are, we remain committed to the core of education. And the core is the well-being of students, our teachers, our general population, and by extension, the nation, St. Lucia. Therefore, that caring attitude continues to permeate everything that we do. We care about our students, we care about our teachers, we care about all of our stakeholders. And we want to ensure that the general public knows, and in particular, our parents, the level of engagement that we always seek, reflective upon that posture. And so we continue to say to them, should they have concerns, should they have queries, any level of anxiety, we are there to support. And similarly, we are there to identify and to highlight so many of the positive things that are happening at our schools, the level of care that our principals, our teachers, our support staff are exhibiting, the engagements that they've done so far. And so we want to applaud them for that, but continue to say, as partners, as responsible partners, we will chart the way forward in a very uncertain time, in a very fluid pandemic, in a situation whereby we all have to take our roles and responsibilities seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. And to you, Chief Environmental Health Officer, Mr. Parker Ragnanan.
Good morning to all our viewers. Good morning to my colleagues. The Ministry of Health and Wellness remains resolute in our efforts to supporting all sectors, including the Ministry of Education, in ensuring that protocols are implemented. Over the past months, we have spent tireless amount of time developing protocols for all sectors throughout St. Lucia. This would have included the tourism sector, the construction sector, the churches, schools, and every other sector you can think of on this island. Protocols have been developed. But protocols is one thing. Adherence to protocol is something completely different. We have seen tremendous amount of work being done at many of our schools on the island in terms of doing adjustments, looking at ways of trying to make it work. And that is important because we recognize that we are not living in the best environment. We also realize that we are in an environment where there is zero risk because we have a pandemic. And therefore, with the pandemic, it means that what we are seeing in St. Lucia is that there are positive cases of COVID, and all of St. Lucia is at risk, every single one of us. Therefore, we need to ensure that the protocols are heightened, they are in place and enforced. That is what is going to help us with reducing the risk of spread of COVID-19. And that is true for every sector, including the education sector. And therefore, we want to emphasize the need for school administrators to ensure that these protocols are followed, to ensure that students comply with the rules. And hence why it is so important for us to work together, because we recognize that we are not in a perfect world, and we need to make adjustments so that we can ensure that the best approach is applied and we are seeing good results. So the ministry would continue to lend support to the sector as we would go along to do assessments of the school and looking at the layout, looking at the capacity, and working with the Ministry of Education in ensuring that protocols are in place. And if the need comes for us to do contact tracing, that will also be done. And the assistance in terms of managing positive cases, we are all on board in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. While we're waiting for the questions from members of the media, I just want to ask Dr. Meyer, are all schools, have they all been equipped with the necessary apparatus, fixtures to ensure a safe environment at the schools that are opened?
Definitely, yes. We appreciate that there's always need to increase and to improve, but we can speak to thermometers at the schools for temperature checks. We can speak to hand washing stations. And at this juncture, we must applaud the schools, even our support staff. Many of them have been at the forefront of the initial construction. They've continued to monitor those situations. The Department of Education, several have been installed also by the department. We have all of the protocols in place in terms of training of individuals as our support staff, our cooks, our janitors, our caretakers, our bus drivers who ply the routes as per our education contracts. So there has been a lot of energy spent, a lot of consultation spent to make sure that we do this well. There is always room for improvement as far as I'm concerned, because as we continue to monitor the situation, various scenarios come up, but it is always with the posture of improving upon those that we work within that sector.
Okay. Can you give us a status update as to perhaps institutions that might have been closed since this formal reopening due to concerns over this virus?
At this juncture, we want to say to the general public that every institution could possibly have a case, as in many other sectors throughout the nation. So the individual cases that we're hearing of, they are people. They are people who have families. It could be me, it could be anybody out there. So it goes to say that even within education, we will have situations that we have to manage. As the general public is aware, we've had one secondary school closed, and a significant part of the discussion must entail the responsible behavior of adults. We have taken this stance as a precautionary measure to safeguard all stakeholders and to continue to monitor and reflect upon the situation, so as to also give the Department of Health the necessary support needed. We have also had other situations whereby, under the guidance of health, we have worked with smaller groupings of schools, and in that case, a particular class, to monitor and to maintain that precautionary posture, as I said earlier, in terms of any contact tracing, students who may have been exposed. But I must continue to say to the general public that the individuals who are getting COVID, and as I said earlier, it could be me, we work within particular sectors, we work particular business places, we work at schools. And so the need to effectively manage those cases will always be present, and we continue to be guided by health as we do so.
We did receive a press release from the ministry with respect to a particular secondary school. If you could just touch on that, give us a status update with respect to that institution. I know the reason for the closure and the return of the students to the distributed learning was because of the concern that some teachers might have been exposed to the virus. Can you give us an update on that?
Well, one of the things that we applauded the Department of Health for is, as they've given updates, we try our best not to identify schools by name. We try our best not to identify students or teachers, for that matter, or any other stakeholder. But the public is aware that we've had one of our secondary schools impacted. We speak to the level of responsibility on the part of the adults, the teachers, most definitely, our parents likewise, and our students. And so it is with that vein that we continue to monitor the situation. The Department of Education did take the decision, out of an abundance of caution, to let that school remain closed for 3 days. We have liaised with the Department of Health, and they've guided us, reference contact tracing, what are the requirements in the event some of our stakeholders may have been impacted. So it is with that in mind that we continue to reflect upon that practice and to work alongside our administrators in effectively managing that situation.
Okay, Mr. Ragnanan, a question for you. Naturally, the whole lives and livelihoods debate remains perched on the reopening of the education sector. Can you just reinforce the assurance on the part of this collaboration between health and education to the general public, understanding that livelihoods being, encompassing education is also being taken care of?
Okay. Thanks for that question. We at the ministry recognize the importance of every sector in this country. And as I've said, the education sector is a very, very important sector. We have looked at risk associated with opening schools. Is the risk greater being in a school environment, or being in a home environment, or being out among friends and socializing? We believe that if protocols are adequately implemented and managed in a school environment, you are reducing the risk of the persons who are in that environment. So that would be both teachers and students and administrators. Therefore, we are cognizant that given where we are at, the system that must actually work is a system that would allow for adequate contact tracing should the need arise. How is that done? There is a team that is trained and designated to do our contact tracing. We would look at the at-risk population. We would look at those who were exposed, and then it would be determined who needs to be quarantined, who needs to get a COVID test done, and at what time, and who can remain and perform their duties on the job. So we are very much committed to doing that. And that is why we want to continue to work with the education sector as well as all other sectors, because they are all very, very important to the development of St. Lucia. And no one should be disadvantaged in this COVID environment that we're in. We all have to take collective approach and stick to work together so that all sectors can move forward, because we are in a very difficult environment, and we do not know how long more we're going to have COVID to deal with in St. Lucia. So we need to begin to get the sectors going.
Okay. The situation, in your address to the Ministry of Health's address to the principals, we did see that there was a scenario featuring prominently being one child. Should one child contract or be suspected of having COVID-19, that there was a system in place in terms of the response, the school-wide response. What if we have, or what if we're faced with a situation where multiple students may have been exposed, or multiple students are suspected of having COVID-19 in a particular classroom?
Yes. So that is where, again, the contact tracing element comes in. That is when it's going to be determined who were exposed, who are possibly at risk. Therefore, once that determination can be made, the ministry is going to consult with our partners in education to determine the best way forward with a given school. One of the things that we want to be very careful with is that we do not use a scenario from one school and apply it across the board to all schools as was done before. We need to recognize that in the environment we are in, people will be exposed. So if it's one child in a school or 10 children in a school, that determination will be made for that school, but not for all schools on the island. And this is one of the things we want to dispel, because we think if we close one school, then we should just close schools. And we need to guard against this. That is why every school needs to have their own systems in place. So one child, one teacher being positive, the determination will be made based on the evidence that is provided, the information that is obtained as to the best approach, whether you can isolate a few from that school and class remains, or whether you need to close that school for a few days to allow for deep cleaning and so forth to resume. But there is not a one-size-fits-all in terms of the approach.
Okay. Good morning, Amani Mathra from Choice TV. My first question regarding the secondary school that's been impacted. Are we satisfied that the 3-day closure is sufficient time? Why or why not?
We are satisfied that the 3-day closure is sufficient because we're guided by the Department of Health. We have had various scenarios come up where individuals have spoken of what amount of closure. Is it a day? Is it that the system continues to operate without closure? But for us at education, a significant partner is the Department of Health. And even then, in collaboration with them and in discussion with them, for the most part, we extend on the amount of time that may have been allocated, simply because we want to be erring on the side of caution And so this is why we are satisfied with this approach.
Okay, and a second question. We've received reports of positive cases among the student population at a primary school in the Castries area. Can you confirm that, and can you provide clarity on what steps have been taken?
We can speak to confirmed cases all over St. Lucia in various areas. As I said earlier, if a family is impacted, that family would have children, and inevitably those children would have been at a school. Yes, we can speak to confirmed cases of teachers. We would not go into detail because these are confidential matters. And we can also speak to cases, 2 cases of confirmed cases at a school. What is significant, and we keep reminding the general public, is the management of those cases, as the COVID is going to impact a business place, other institutions of interaction and of learning, but it is about the effective management. And to speak to specifically what has been done, we have engaged with health. We know contact tracers have been on the ground. In some of our cases, we've had our doctors visit the schools. We've had our health professionals speak to our health and safety officer. There's been a lot of engagement trying to ensure that we revert and we remain with the established protocols, as our education continuity plan speaks to those specific scenarios. And training happened when we reopened to ensure that everybody was given an opportunity to go through those and ask questions. So the scenarios will come up. There may be a teacher, there may be 2 teachers, there may be 3 teachers, there may be a student, there may be a janitor, but those specific scenarios are clearly identified and the various courses of action that must happen.
So my question was specifically in relation to a press release that came out last night, which is purported to be from the Ministry of Education. So I just wanted to clarify that specific school referenced in that press release.
Well, there wasn't a press release. There was a letter sent to parents. And this is what we have to be cognizant of. There is a particular audience. We also appreciate that information will go out there and will be forwarded. So we're never in denial that this is going to happen. But there is a different posture of a press release as compared to informing parents that we want to be vigilant about a particular case.
So just for the record, can you provide some clarity on what steps have been taken in relation to that specific institution?
Okay, that specific institution, we have our students who have been impacted. There's been contact tracing. The affected families, as well as the affected colleagues, have been informed. There have been meetings with the principals, with the education officers, the Department of Health, and all the necessary national protocols, as per the Department of Health, have gone into play.
Thank you, Amani. Question for you, Mr. Ragnanan. There is a degree of confidence on the part of your office in the controlled environment of the institutions, the schools. But what happens when between the time that the children arrive at the school and leave school? There have been concerns over loitering in the city and so on. What measures have been put in place in collaboration with perhaps the city council and so on to address this?
That's very important, because the school environment is one thing, outside of the school environment is something completely different. We really need to strengthen our ability to take the basic actions in terms of protecting ourselves. And that is why we know it's been proven for COVID that wearing a mask is important, physical distance is important, hand washing and hand sanitizing, extremely important. We want to encourage teachers and students to observe these measures at all times. We also want to encourage persons not to get into groups and not to congregate in common areas. The police has had a very difficult task trying to break up groups and so forth, and we'll continue to monitor that situation. But it's a matter that we are hoping that they'll be self-compliant rather than having to enforce. I think we really need to take responsibility, and all of us The thing about it is, many a times we're looking at somebody else and we excuse ourselves. We think we're okay, but this person isn't okay. The thing is, we need to take collective responsibility as a nation, as parents, as teachers, as citizens, as students. We need to play our part. And that is what we've been saying from day one. We need to do what must be done. And therefore, we are discouraging people from congregating, whether you are students or adults. We are encouraging people to physical distance themselves, to wear a mask, to protect themselves, because as the risk increases, the protective measure must increase as well. So we want to encourage our students that after school, as quick as possible, please get home. I know many of our schools, if not all, have implemented measures where parents need to come as soon as the school day has ended because they do not want loitering on the premises. Again, that is to manage or to avert any catastrophe at the school. So the same has to happen across the board.
Okay, I do want to acknowledge the presence in studio of the Dr. the Honorable Gail Rigobert, Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development. And hopefully we could just take a quick break. But before we do that, I want to ask of you, Dr. Meyer, you did mention the importance of the consultative approach. To what degree, have the parents, because I know parents are very concerned. You have some parents who have no issues with the return to the classroom, but wonder, are the fixtures in place? As you have assured, they are in place. But to what degree have parents been brought into the consultation to ensure a degree of buy-in by the parent population?
Well, we appreciate that as we consult, some groups may be consulted more simply because of the logistics of everything, and others less. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we have consulted with parents. We note that this is an area that more will be done and more could have been done, and so we have already planned particular meetings with parents district-wise just to get their feedback on what's happening. We remain committed as a Department of Education because on a daily basis, we have our parents come into the department, make telephone calls, and engage also with the administrators as to what their concerns are. At this juncture, I want to bring in the bit about homeschooling. Some of the parents have chosen to consider that option, and so we have said to them that we have made the forms available to them, particularly reference any medical issues that a parent may have, a child may have, and it's of a concern to them. But we remain committed to that engagement, and even after the fact that we've opened, as we continue, any parent, any grouping, any PTA that would like to invite us, we will definitely endeavor to be there. But similarly, we will put in a formal engagement with parents, hopefully via this station, likewise for them to send in any questions as from our parents.
Absolutely. And just want to invite parents, viewers in general who may have queries, comments for the Chief Education Officer, the Permanent Secretary in the department, as well as now we have on set the Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development, Dr. the Honorable Gail Rigobert. If you have any questions for them, you can post them in our Facebook Live or our YouTube. Also, to members of the media, you can also post your questions either on those platforms or in the Media Association group. I would like to welcome you. Good morning, Dr. Rigobert.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We're just, on the topic of the return to the classroom. Of course, many persons feeling that we could have preempted, perhaps some of the closures that have happened, the measures that have been put in place, definitely anticipated on the part of the Ministry of Education and Health. Any weigh in on, some of the measures that have been put in place, certainly not to be of too much concern to parents.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish to thank my team for working tirelessly to ensure that we continue to engage with stakeholders to give the reassurance that whereas the situation with COVID is very fluid, that our paramount concern remain the health and safety of our children and educators, our ancillary staff, and that we are committed to ensuring that while we honor our duty to provide instruction to the nation's children, that their health will not be sacrificed at the expense of instruction. And that is why we have worked collaboratively with the Ministry of Health and other stakeholders to ensure that the various interests are well represented, and that whatever we decide, whatever course of action that we take, is informed by these multiple perspectives and concerns. We may have said it several times before, but it must be underscored that the situation with COVID-19 remains very fluid. Evidently, there is some community spread here on island, given that schools are a microcosm of the wider society. The children come from homes where there are adults. The adults work in certain institutions, they visit other social spaces, and so we had expected that we would have to deal with COVID-19 in schools. And that is why, since the incident of last year, where we had to deal with a particular school, we have spent those interim months fine-tuning the protocols. So it is very well defined in our national schools protocols what should obtain in tandem with what we are also adopting from regional and international agencies. We understand and appreciate the anxiety and concern of parents. This is a very, very delicate dance. We listen to the concern of parents who have challenges with babysitting when they are required to go to work and their children are left unattended. We also have to consider the concerns of parents who have children with underlying conditions. That has to be brought into the equation as well. We also have to listen to the concerns of parents who perhaps are not well equipped to provide the level of parental supervision or educational support to their children with the online learning modality. And some of these parents feel more comfortable having their children in the classroom. We also have to be mindful of parents who rely not only on the educational or instructional support that schools provide, but also the nutritional and other psychosocial support mechanism offerings that we deliver within the school setting. All of these have to be brought into the equation along with the health and safety concerns. So that is just to indicate to the public how delicate a dance this is, how many variables we are juggling simultaneously. Do we want to jeopardize the well-being of our students and educators or persons who work within the school plant? Absolutely not. Would we prefer, if we had the option, to halt schools and wait for COVID to do its thing? Like the health professionals remind us all the time, this situation is fluid. We don't know how the COVID situation is going to evolve. And so what we have been doing and we continue to do is to be as predictive as is possible. And there's only a very short window of predictability within this business that we now find ourselves in this situation. We can only predict so much, so far ahead, given how fluid it is. And that is why we have to be very responsive. We have to be nimble. We have to be prepared to fine-tune protocols as we go along. And I really want to thank my team in that regard. And I pray, too, that the public, members of the public, will do their part to comply with the protocols, because that's as far as the prescription goes for now. Very well-defined protocols that all of us have been asked to please, please adhere to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rigobert. There are a few questions coming in that I want to ask before you, Amani. School insurance. There is a question coming in from a parent. They're asking, does it take into consideration the COVID-19 response in the schools?
Well, the COVID response is part of a national program, so any health care surrounding COVID is taken care of as per national policies, and our insurance covers any incident at schools, and even on the way to and from school as well.
Okay, and some persons want to know where can they get the forms for homeschooling?
The homeschooling form can be emailed to a parent. We deal with it through the Office of the Chief Education Officer. So a simple email to us, we can email the forms out. Similarly, parents have come in to ask questions. What is significant about homeschooling that we need to ensure that the general public knows is that when a parent does apply, there is an investigative period during which time we contact the schools, we have discussions. But it is the responsibility of a parent or guardian, if he or she chooses to apply for it, that there is no obligation on the part of the school to continuously instruct that child while that child is at home, in as much as in most of the cases we are doing so. But it would be a decision to homeschool speaks to exactly that. After the forms are returned, a decision of approval or further discussion is then sent via a formal letter to a parent, copied to the school and the education officer.
Okay, reading this question from a parent, I assume verbatim. Why must we pay fees for public early childhood centers when our kids never did the previous term that we paid for?
Repeat the question.
Why must we pay fees for public early childhood centers when our kids never did the previous term that we paid for?
Yes, if this has happened at all, then there is an early childhood unit within the Ministry of Education that works closely with the public daycares or early childhood centers. And I would encourage the parent who is asking this question to reach out to the unit to get further clarification and to figure out how we can resolve this matter in their interest.
We also need to add that our early childhood sector, as per the public sector, is a highly subsidized sector. The fees are quite minimal. I think the last count was about $105 for a term, meaning 3 months. But if there are any discrepancies there, we remain committed to speaking to the parents about that.
And we have done that before, because
Yes.
when we have refunded parents, especially what happened within the last school year.
Okay, given that students and teachers are expected to be moving between face-to-face learning and distributed learning and back again, on perhaps very short notice as we discover cases, can you speak to the expected impact that this could have on learning?
Well, we appreciate that as we manage the situation, such cases will come up. At the moment, all of our schools have face-to-face interaction. We have 34 schools, both primary and secondary, the largest schools, that have what the general public would refer to as rotation, but we speak about distributed learning in that event. Even today, a presentation will be done to parents on Google Suites and the effective use of the Google platforms. There's been significant training, and we're very pleased to announce that as of December 17th, every educational institution on island is privy to the entire Google Suites as per an official platform for educational engagements. This is something that's quite significant for us, and we know the IT team is very happy about that. So that will help us have a more consistent platform whereby our students will be trained. Many of them are trained already. We have training happening in the various districts, and even today, Mr. Anthony is here, and following this presentation, there'll be a presentation to parents how to use it, what to look out for. And so this is the mandate of education, to constantly engage the parents, because some parents may not know, but this is our preview, a specific YouTube video targeted at our St. Lucian parents to give them that overview. But individual schools as well as districts have taken on the training in a very significant way.
And can I just add to that, Chief,
Please.
that this also provides us with the opportunity to standardize our instruction in the online virtual space. And it's important that parents do follow Mr. Anthony's presentation, following our presentation here, because it's an opportunity for them to learn as well as our students and our teachers.
So as a follow-up to that, does the ministry believe that these shifts could negatively impact learning for students?
What we want to do, we want to ensure we have a consistent approach to learning. We want to ensure that whatever modality that's used, that there is a human element to it, there is a face to it, there is that interaction between an educator and a child. We recognize that only virtual learning leaves many of our children hanging. They do not have that contact. So for us, yes, any instability, let's say it like that, would have an impact. But what we want to do, we want to manage effectively, we want to offer the training, we want to offer the facilities, the resources, and likewise engage our other stakeholders so as to ensure that that level of support is always given to our students.
Okay. And on a related note, can you give us a progress update on the academic recovery program in terms of when it's expected to be completed and implemented in schools?
Mr. Dawson Ragan, I'm actually looking to him. He is our Deputy Chief Responsible for Instruction, and he is intimately aware of that program. What is happening with the academic recovery program is that OECS, and it's not only St. Lucia, it's an OECS-led initiative that will impact all of the islands. We have a consultant on board, having recognized that our students have been out for a while. And so some of them may have accessed the virtual and online learning very well. Others may not have done just as well. But it is to target and to look at those gaps that this almost an entire year has presented and to put specific programs in place. We're very pleased that we have a team with representatives from our various stakeholders who are already chatting the way forward to make sure that our principals, for example, our National Principals Association has a representative, other stakeholders are on board to look at where are our gaps. And it is important also to let the general public know that we have done the needs assessment. So we're not simply coming and saying we think this is where the gaps are, but we're doing the needs assessment to ascertain what concepts have the students not learned and how best to use not only face-to-face interaction, but the online space, recorded lessons, all of those interactions, and we're hoping to also build our capacity. So to have a bank of information, a bank of lessons that we can use as part of the academic recovery program.
Okay. So just as a follow-up, can you speak to why that plan wasn't planned to be rolled out to coincide with the beginning of the most recent academic term?
Minister used the word, fluid. The situation is fluid. We note that as per all over the world, the pandemic is hitting in different ways. Different things are happening within our system. And so with the initiative that is an OECS 1, also supported by St. Lucia in very many ways, an idea that we had as well, we are rolling it out.
Thank you very much, Amani, for those questions. We do have a question from another parent, I'd assume again. I would like to know why didn't the Ministry of Education just reopen for grade 6 and CXC students for now?
That's a very good question, which I'll allow Chief and PS to respond to. But that question is indicative of one of the things we're trying to cure within the education system, which is an exam-centric focus. Whereas we realize that these students are at a critical stage in their academic career where they are required to take aptitude tests, we are more concerned about the overall education that all of our students receive. Of course, a particular effort is being made to accommodate these two classes and forms respectively, but not at the expense of the others. And one of the things that I would want for us to bear in mind is that whereas we have curricula and we are expected to deliver curricula to particular grades, to students at a particular age, there are other aspects of the development of our children that are important to us. This generation of students will in time prove to be one of the most resilient, one of the most responsive, even responsible, because I tell you, it is always heartwarming to see the extent to which the little ones, the younger ones, adhere to the protocols. And I almost want to say to the older ones, can you please follow the lead of the younger ones to the extent that the younger ones are compliant? But let us remember that whereas education in an intuitive sense seems to focus on instruction, we always underscore holistic education. What are the other lessons that can be learned from this experience of COVID-19? Grit, stickability, perseverance. How nimble are we as an institution, as a people, as children, as educators? There are so many other aspects to the development of a human being that are brought into sharp focus, and I think that COVID-19 may very well present us with an opportunity to sharpen those other life skills we speak of so very often, the ability to work under pressure, to respond in a particular way, to be malleable, to adjust, to be responsive, to be compassionate, to be empathetic. There are so many other elements that we focus on within the education system outside of very strict scientific, technical curricula to be delivered by a particular time to a particular age group. Over to you, Chief.
Yes. Done a brilliant job, Minister. I couldn't add anything else except to say that all of our children matter. Every single child matters. And that when we open school, when we reopen school, when we contemplate that discussion, it is that our tiniest of tots are important, as well as our secondary students into higher education. And we are guided by health. We are always seeking that guidance as to what is the most safe way to do things, to ensure that we have happy children. And the happy children can be 3-year-old, and they can be 5, and they can be 10 and 11. So that's really, really important to us.
Okay. I also want to ask a question about the psychosocial support provided to the school population. Can you give us any update on who has tapped into that support? No, many teachers have expressed concern in that regard.
Well, we are pleased to note that at every district level, that psychosocial support, emotional support was provided through the office of our district counselors, our school counselors, headed by our head counselor. Up to yesterday, I got a report on the number of teachers per district, per school that access this. And so it is significant to note, we will always make those available, but similarly, we need the adults in the room, similarly, to accept that level of intervention. And it is not a one-off for us. It is that we remain committed and constantly and consistently available to offer that level of support through the necessary agencies. And I know that our teachers are keenly aware. Similarly, through public health, through the Department of Public Service, we have those services available to us as well. But our first course of action is to engage with our counselors on the ground, who I know, and based on all of the reports that I've gotten, also from some of our teachers, have been really, really engaging our people.
Can I add to that? The Ministry of Education takes this responsibility very seriously. And to that end, we have equipped our counselors, especially in the district offices, with mobile phones that would allow them to be able to reach their students, parents in communities, and teachers as well. So for us, this is a critical factor.
Okay. We have some more questions. You know, just plainly, I know there are many concerned persons in the Facebook chat, the YouTube platform, all very worried and I dare say, you know, concerned still, you know, after the pronouncements made on this live. So for their benefit, I will ask, what will it take? We've heard so far that from the Chief Environmental Health Officer that it will take more than one child being sick at a school to close the school. What will it take for a school to close, and what will it take for us to close the education sector for their benefit?
Let me begin by saying, as we have indicated previously and have practiced over what is really now almost a year, we're just 10 months in to this, that when it comes to the closure of schools and the clinical or medical necessity to do so, we are guided by the Ministry of Health. And that is always done in consultation with education and other stakeholders. And that is why we continue to say, if I'm to echo the CMO and her team, this is very fluid. And we can only be predictive to a certain point. That is why we are on the telephone with one another and with other colleagues from the Ministry of Health several times a day, in the last couple of days in particular, to ensure that we are on top of this, to ensure that we are in conversation with stakeholders and that they too are in the know. We have made the necessary adjustments with respect to the requisite budgetary requirements to meet additional costs, such as one that we are considering now, which is to increase the numbers of hours that janitors and caretakers perhaps work per day, so as to allow for that daily cleaning of schools. So whether it be a financial adjustment to allow for a more effective response, whether it be an adjustment to the instruction modality, whether it be an adjustment to the transportation arrangements, or to the school feeding program, or as we did earlier today, to outfit our special education unit, as we did with the St. Lucia Blind Welfare Association this morning, to provide the technical support, to give additional devices. Whatever the intervention that is required, we will do so. But with respect to the closure of schools, we remain guided by the Ministry of Health as to when we should do so, if at all it is required.
Okay, thank you very much. I now offer the floor, you all, to offer final words as we wrap up this press briefing.
Okay. I'd just like to say in closing, Jesse, that at the Ministry of Education, we cannot trivialize the anxiety of parents and our other stakeholders at all. This is critical to us and forefront in every decision, discussion, policy or protocol that we put in place. And we would like to reassure our parents, stakeholders, citizens at large, that the Ministry of Education wishes to continue all of the necessary dialogue that is going to allow us to put in place recommendations and initiatives that are going to benefit everyone across the sector. We are not focused only on, as the Minister indicated quite clearly, education and instruction, but all of the other facets that come to the fore within the education landscape. And this is critical for us. We are looking to develop our students holistically. We're also taking into consideration the impact on our teachers, our ancillary staff, our leadership within our school system. And so for us, as we chart these uncharted, as we go through these uncharted waters, whatever decisions that we make really are, in our view, in the best interest of our education stakeholders.
Dr. Meyer, Dr. Rigobert.
Well, we just want to thank everybody. We want to thank those parents who've come up and said how much their children have missed school and the impact of going back into the physical setting and the joy that they've come back home with. We want to recognize that there is anxiety, no way that we can get away from that. But we also want to speak to a responsible adult population, a responsible parental body that would remind and be reminded that if a child is unwell, they stay at home, a responsible teaching group that would speak to, the protocols and adherence to them, even within our own social gatherings and our own physical spaces, our own family situations. We want to speak to the continued engagement that is significant to our youngest of ones and our Alpha Louis Community College students in higher education. These are important. And I cannot leave without speaking to student voice, and not necessarily individual groups, but what are our children saying to us as parents? What are they coming back to? And to look at education not as an institution, as a building, but the socialization that happens during that time that many of us 30 years on, we still remember our everyday learning experiences at school. So it is important to balance this out with our health and safety and the various perspectives of our stakeholders, but to remember our children at the center of our educational system in St. Lucia, and if they are, we as the adults in the room would do everything we can to protect them, but likewise to make sure that everybody in that system remains safe but have an enjoyable time. So I want to thank everybody out there, and in particular our people on the ground who have been so supportive, who have been proactive, who have spoken of the need to maintain a safe environment for our children while we offer them the best possible opportunity for education. Thank you.
Dr. the Honorable Rigobert.
Thank you, Jessie, for the opportunity. I too wish to reiterate our gratitude for the multiple input that we've had from various stakeholders, concerned citizens, and to reaffirm our commitment to the nation, to our children, that you do matter to us. You are our core business. The children of this nation are our core business. They are the ones who concern us. They are the reason we come to work enthused, hopeful, and wanting to present to them the best opportunity for learning. To our educators and ancillary staff, we want to say to you that as valued partners, we rely on you to deliver to our children what is due unto them. To our parents, we too are parents. We too are aunts. We too have relatives who are children, who share some of the anxieties that you share with us. So we understand firsthand what you are going through, and we are all in this together. And that is why the solution requires for all of us to do the right thing. We can do this together.
Thank you very much, all three on panel. Michelle Charles, Permanent Secretary in the Department of Education, Information and Gender Relations, also the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Fiona Philip-Meyer, and Dr. the Honorable Gail Rigobert, the Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development. We also had on hand earlier in the broadcast the Chief Environmental Health Officer, just being there to be able to answer questions from the health perspective, and we do hope that you have been so far satisfied with the answers that you've received. I have poured through. My attention has been divided between this panel and our various live platforms to try to answer as many questions from you, parents, viewers in general, as possible as we have so far entered this new school term. Continue to keep safe, adhere to the protocols. We've so far seen the third wave of the coronavirus here in St. Lucia. I encourage you to take personal responsibility and to convey the same to your children, your wards, that in order for us to be able to reduce the risk of transmission, the rate of transmission here on island. I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day. It's all the time we have for now this afternoon. Keep safe. My name is Jessie Leon, signing off for now. Thank you all.